Welcome to New Jersey Politics with Laura Jones. I am Laura Jones, and we are so glad to have you here. Primary election day is upon us, and on May 20th, the Republican candidates for governor faced off in a critical debate at the Donald M. Payne Senior School of Technology in Newark just weeks before the June 10th primary. The event was produced by the New Jersey Globe, On New Jersey, and Rider University, as well as Save Jersey. And it was a 2.5-hour debate focusing on three key issues: affordability, crime, and education. We're joined now by David Wildstein, editor of the New Jersey Globe, who was a panelist at the debate, as well as Jeanette Hoffman, president of Marathon Public Affairs. David, Jeanette, good to see you both.
Thanks, Good to see you, Laura.
All right, so David, I want to start with you. Yeah.
Hi, David.
David, let's start with you. So this debate, it was a 2.5-hour format, and we focused on those three issues: affordability and taxes, education, crime and immigration. Also, our three candidates are State Senator John Bramnick, former Assemblyman Jack Ciattarelli, and radio personality Bill Spadea. So, David, let's talk a little bit about the format and how it shaped the conversation compared to a debate we held back in February and other formats that were held. Because you got a little pushback when you said, I want to do something for 2.5 hours.
Yeah, I did, and I don't care, and my heart goes out to these poor candidates. Not all of them complained, by the way. Some of them liked it a lot from the very beginning. But my heart goes out to these poor candidates who get $5.5 million in matching funds from the taxpayers, and all they have to do for $5.5 million is do these debates. So if you look at the hourly rate of $5.5 million for 2.5 hours of addressing questions, it's not so bad. I don't feel badly for them at all. The reality is, Laura, that voters have never been less informed than they are today. And with legacy media, I don't even want to say dying anymore. Maybe Jeanette will say that I'm wrong. I don't think she will. But they're not dying. They are dead. I have sat Shiva for them. We have all moved on from them. And the result of their demise is that it's left voters with less information. So a 2.5-hour debate gave us an opportunity to really get into the weeds. For example, in the Republican debate, we talked about crime for 45 minutes with a lot of specifics from all three of the candidates. On a good day, in a regular, traditional 1-hour format, at best you're going to get one of these, hey, what are you going to do to lower crime rates? So I really liked it, and I think there needs to be more long form.
Yeah, well, and that's the thing. A lot of these debates, they come in, they're ready. And Jeanette, we'll get you to weigh in here. People are prepared. They are ready with their sound bites, ready to go. But as a public affairs expert, can you talk about some of the benefits or even challenges of a 2.5-hour debate when it is, issue focused on the candidates, when they are trying to connect with the voters, and also in this day and age where there aren't as many, as David sat Shiva for legacy media. So can you talk a little bit about the pros and cons and your take?
Sure. Well, first of all, Laura and David, I want to give you both and your entire team tremendous credit. It takes an army to produce the type of debate that you and your teams produced for the Republican side and the Democratic side. So kudos to both of you and your teams for doing that. And after the first Republican debate that you produced, I thought there was going to be physical violence. So congratulations for that not happening, because I actually thought it was a very civil debate. And there was a lot of substance. So that was the pros. They dug deep, those candidates, in a lot of policy issues, specifically education. We got to hear a lot on how all three candidates up there would address the cost of education, school funding. You heard Bill Spadea talk specifically about the cost of education in our cities, in places like Newark and Patterson, Camden. He would expand school choice, access to more charter schools. Jack Ciattarelli also, and John Bramnick talked about S2, the current school funding formula, and how it's failed the suburbs and how schools are having to cut back, and that's directly impacting our property taxes. And you didn't hear the sound bites that you would normally get in a quick interview about, well, if we fix the school funding formula. They really dug in. They had to, because, like you said, it's a long form debate. And I think that definitely serves the voters very well, because you can't get away with a 10-second answer in a lot of these questions. So congratulations for forcing the candidates to really show up, put out thoughtful policy, uh, uh, thoughtful plans. The downside for candidates is that there is much more of a chance that they could make a mistake. I think Jack Ciattarelli, being the front runner by so many points, had the hardest job of the debate, and I think he did quite well in not making any damaging mistakes that could have turned into a commercial for any of his opponents. So I think he did quite well. I think all the candidates really did a great job in putting together thoughtful answers. Yeah. And it was really a great debate. So congratulations to him.
Well, thank you. Yeah, David, we were ready. We were very prepared for this debate. Looking back to the February debate, which was a slugfest, people just going back and forth, speaking over each other. Really, my role as moderator, I was trying to be on the offense to ensure that they were not talking over each other. But we planned that, we built that in, expecting that they would, but they really didn't. Was that surprising to you at all?
Yeah, it was, but I guess another advantage of 2.5 hours is they got all of their meanness out in the first 20 minutes. And, they just couldn't sustain it. They couldn't sustain 2.5 hours of insults and shots, and none of them would have looked good, over that time. And I remember a time, Jeanette Hoffman was one of the best in the business when it came to doing debate prep. When her clients would go in for these things, Laura, you and I saw our end, right? Which is how do you set up these
being made. We made the sausage.
But we didn't see what was happening in other parts of the state, where all of these candidates, all 8 of them from the 2 parties, were spending hours and hours prepping what would happen. And, it's probably a better question. Am I allowed to ask a question to somebody else on your show?
Please do. Go for it. We can do whatever
so,
we
Jeanette,
want.
You would have, and I know the answer to it because I know you, 25 years, but you'd have prepped your candidates for a slugfest and for a milquetoast debate. They went in there, I guess, right, going in prepared to see how it went, to go either way.
And you heard some of the one-liners come out, right? Like, I could pick out who had their one-liners ready to go. Like, you heard John Bramnick come back at Spadia saying, well, I go after your record, Spadia, but you don't have one, right? So, like, you knew that was, I don't want to say canned, because John's really quick on his feet, so maybe it wasn't canned. But those are the things that you come to expect in a debate, those quick one-liners and the back and forth. And Spadia had some ready to go, and Ciattarelli had some ready to go back at Spadia. And you expect those things specifically on the amnesty issue and the driver's license for illegals. And they had their quick hits ready to go on which bills. And you heard Spadia come back at Ciattarelli saying, oh, the bill was, I forget what it was. It was like S2 or A2003. And that's what he voted to raise your income taxes or whatever. I forget the specific issue. But those were planned. But when, to your point, David, when it's so long, you get those out right out of the way. And then it really does become about policy. And the meanness gets out of the way, but there was some meanness. There were some punches.
Yeah. Well, let me ask a little bit about, David, to you, the role of President Trump. He had endorsed Jack Ciattarelli coming into this debate. So there was some question of, gosh, is Jack's to lose, more or less? John Bramnick is the only one who was able to say, yeah, I've never tried to get President Trump's support. Whereas Bill Spadia was saying, well, no, President Trump endorsed a poll, not a person. So how do you think President Trump played into this debate, and no matter who wins this primary, how that shapes the campaign for the Republicans come November?
I mean, look, Jack Ciattarelli is the front runner. You never say. I mean, we live in Yogi Berra state, so it's not over till it's over. But Ciattarelli, really courted that Trump endorsement, and working with Kellyanne Conway and a super PAC and doing the footwork necessary at the White House. Jack Ciattarelli didn't just walk into Bedminster and get a few minutes at the President of the United States table and charm him. This has been in the works for a very long time, and and so you still didn't see any candidates up there criticizing Trump, and you wouldn't in a Republican primary because these are I think Trump's approval rating in the last poll that I saw among primary voting Republicans in New Jersey was 90%. So, what you saw there is sort of Spadia finessing of criticizing the process without criticizing the endorser. And I think what you saw Chitterelli doing a little bit, and I shouldn't say a little bit. I think what you saw Chitterelli doing a lot, and Jeanette knows this better than I do. I think it was pretty smart. He was being very careful not to create any sound bites from this debate that can become a Democratic ad in the fall.
Oh, that's a great point. And Jeanette, that's what I kind of want to go to. In a Republican primary, you tend to run to the right. And when you move to the general, you want to be a little bit more center. So how does this play? How does President Trump's involvement, or, will he be involved? Because, we only have 2 governor's races in the country, us and Virginia, New Jersey and Virginia. When it comes to winning the governor's seat in New Jersey, this being a purple-ish, purple-blue leaning state.
Well, I think, listen, no matter who wins this primary, and it looks like it's Jack Chitterelli's to lose, anything can happen on Election Day, as David says, the Republicans are going to be tied to Trump. Nationally, that is what the Democrats are planning to do. They're looking at New Jersey, they're looking at Virginia as the first test to President Trump. So I think it was smart for Jack Chitterelli to get Trump's endorsement, but he's going to be tied to Trump no matter what, right? But voters are smarter than that. They know they've had 8 years of a Democratic governor raising their property taxes, 8 years of a Democratic governor and a legislature raising their energy bills. They know this election is going to be about New Jersey issues. And that's what Jack Chitterelli is running on, right? He's talking about education. He's talking about property taxes. He's talking about affordability. His most recent commercial TV ad was not about Bill Spadia. It was not about the Republican primary. It was about energy bills. It was about your energy rates going up by 20% under Phil Murphy and the Democrats. So that's all he's going to be talking about. Of course, the Democrats are going to try to make him about Donald Trump, but this is about New Jersey and about New Jersey issues. And I think if you looked at the debate, like David rightly said, that's what he was focused on.
Jersey does what Jersey always does. So we're going to take a quick commercial break, and we're going to hear from the candidates on the other side. Stay with us as we continue here on New Jersey Politics with Laura Jones. Thanks for staying with New Jersey Politics with Laura Jones. We are here joined by David Wildstein of the New Jersey Globe and Jeanette Hoffman, and we are kind of recapping the Republican primary debate. And let's hear first from the candidates. I want to go first to John Bramnick. He is answering a question about waste, fraud, and abuse. Let's listen to him, and then I'll get the 2 of you to weigh in. John Bramnick.
Well, I hear waste, fraud, and abuse. I like the concept, but you have to actually look closely at every cut. I think sometimes we cut across the board without actually doing the forensic audit. And any business, they don't just cut across the board. What they do is they look at the programs that are successful, they study the programs, and then they cut.
All right, so David, we structured this debate into 3 categories. And when it came to this, do you feel that John Bramnick, was he answering the questions? Was he getting to the heart of what you wanted answered?
Yeah, I mean, Bramnick was pretty good at answering questions. He's not a guy who ducks them, and I'm somebody who, I almost said answer this question without using the words waste, fraud, and abuse, because it's almost like they have that tattooed on the palm of their hand. Pivot to waste, fraud, and abuse. How are you going to cut the budget? Well, we're going to get rid of the waste, fraud, and abuse, without ever giving any specifics. Bramnick got to a specific. He said he cut the Christmas tree items, but I don't think anybody doubts that there's waste in government. I don't doubt that I'm probably wasting money at home in terms of some of the things I spend money on. it's that's the world. I mean, the government does it, private sector does it. There's always something that you can pare down. I don't know how much fraud there is, and it's Jersey, and it's the middle name of New Jersey is New Abuse Jersey. Everybody you've got. I think sometimes the majority party, by the way, it's not Democrats, it's not Republicans, it's the grifter party. And the real politicians in New Jersey have just mastered their ability to grift. So yeah, you can cut around those edges, but you're talking about a $58 billion budget. And there's a pretty good chance that you don't have $5 billion in waste, fraud, and abuse. So Bramnick did okay, and he's better than most on these questions. But it's just those are three words that people just rely on for a soundbite.
Jeanette, let me get your take from John Bramnick, because one of the things about his campaign and him just as a person in general, whether in the legislature or running for governor, he talks about being able to work across the aisle, work with both sides. What do you think? Was he able to portray that with also the ability to answer questions? Because sometimes you have to really hone in on a question and you've got to take a side. Again, a lot of what I hear about John Bramnick is he knows how to appeal to both sides. Sometimes you don't always get a straight answer out of somebody when they are trying to be everything to everyone. I don't know if that's a fair representation, but what do you think?
Yeah, no, John's a smart guy. He knows the budget in Trenton, like inside and out. He's been in the Assembly and the Senate, I think, since 2003. David will correct me if I'm wrong. But listen, he knows Trenton. He's able to answer questions about the budget. He's about the legislative process. He's able to appeal to independents. And some of the things, if you listen to his interviews before the debate, he's very genuine. He said, I didn't like the Democrat debate because it felt like very canned answers. And he comes across as very genuine, very likable. He made me laugh a couple times in the debate because he's very quick-witted. He's a comedian. He can bring people together. What he says he doesn't like about the Trump administration is the anger, the divisiveness in politics. I thought his answers were really good. What I thought was particularly interesting about the waste, fraud, and abuse question was I thought it was a little subtle criticism about DOJ and Elon Musk, that they just go in there with a sledgehammer and not a scalpel. But he didn't say DOJ, right? He wasn't outwardly criticizing DOJ because it is very popular among Republicans, but I don't think it's very popular among independents right now. So I think it was more of a general election answer actually than a Republican primary answer.
Somebody talking a lot about ONNJ DOJ is Bill Spadia, and let's listen now to a soundbite from him talking about spending in education.
What are we going to do? We are going to cut some higher education. I'm going to start with $1 billion cut out of the Rutgers budget. It is absolutely outrageous that Rutgers University has a $5 billion budget, $1 billion coming from the taxpayers, and still one of the most expensive in-state tuitions in the entire country. What we really have to do is get into middle school and high school and start talking to kids about other careers. Why are we not talking about getting into the skilled trades? Why does every kid have to go to college and endure a six-figure debt with no prospects of jobs? We need to change education and the way we think.
All right, Jeanette, I'll go to you first with this one. Bill Spadia is someone who is very good at public speaking. He's somebody who's spent a career, talking on his radio station. He was also a television host, so he comes across very well. So, what were your thoughts on his performance? And when he's talking about whether it's addressing education or about ONNJ DOJ himself.
Yeah, so this comes right out of President Trump's playbook, taking money from Harvard to give it to the trade schools. But this is actually something Bill Spadia has been talking about for years, ever since I've known him on 101.5 and Chasing News. He is a real believer in we need more people in trade schools, more people who are training to be plumbers, electricians, HVAC workers, than people coming out of college with, six-figure debt. So this is actually, President Trump's talking about it now, but Bill Spadia has been talking about this for a long time. This appeals to, middle-income workers, blue-collar workers, independents, not just Republicans. So this is very true to Bill's core values, something that he's been talking about for a long time. And I think a lot of people want to see, he's also been talking about cutting Rutgers and their spending. And it's very true that Rutgers has a very high tuition rate for an in-state school, because I have kids going to college out of state. And frankly, they're spending less money to go to other states than they would be to go to Rutgers. So listen, Bill has done his homework as well. When asked what he would cut out of the budget for something, I think, David, you said it was over $100 million, he quickly went to a new stadium in Middlesex County that would cost over $129 million. And he knew right away. He was very quick on his feet.
Yeah, David, I mean, he gave specifics. You were asking candidates specifics. What would you cut? And he was very clear.
Yeah, and I'll tell you one thing that I was surprised at is I asked the candidates about the salaries that Rutgers pays their football coach, $6.5 million a year. Their basketball coach, $4 million a year. You know, Bramnick jumped on that and he says, "Yeah, I'm going to call them all in and say you got to get me a cheaper coach." But the other two had interesting answers that surprised me in a Republican debate. Spadia says, "I don't do salary shaming. I'm not going to get into that. We're just going to cut $1 billion out of their budget. That's what I think the state should be spending, $1 billion less. Let them figure it out." And Chittorelli had, a statesman-like answer there, which was he said, "Look, we want to be in the Big Ten. We made a decision to compete, New Jersey to compete at that level, and these are some of the things you have to do to compete." So you didn't see a whole lot of grandstanding on that question.
All right, let's listen now to a soundbite from Jack Chittorelli. He's talking about crime in this soundbite.
We've created professional criminals. Talk to local police. Arrest, release, repeat is real. It's demoralizing for a cop to arrest somebody in the morning, have them be out by 1 in the afternoon, and they've committed the same crime in the next town over that afternoon. So,
all right, so that was Jack Chittorelli. One of the areas of focus, we were talking about crime and immigration. So, David, I'll go to you when we went to that. Well, that was our last segment, I believe, that we waited, is crime and immigration. What you thought about their performance on that?
It was a good answer. Sometimes hesitate when I do this, but can I translate this question? Maybe put up on closed caption what he was saying.
Yeah.
What he was saying is, "Dear PBA, please endorse me. I want police union support in the general election, and here's the answer that you can play for your members as to why you should support my candidacy."
Yeah. Jeanette, what do you think? I mean, again, Jack Chittorelli is the front runner, but this is New Jersey. Anything can happen. And by the way, I'm pretty sure you're right about John Bramnick 2003, because that's when I was pregnant with my daughter, Kate. So yeah, I'm pretty sure that was the first time I interviewed him, New Jersey's funniest lawyer. But anyway, go back, your thoughts on that.
Yeah. I mean, I think all the candidates had good comments on crime, Jack especially. I mean, listen, bail reform issue, the catch and release issue is huge in New Jersey. The car thefts are out of control here in Monmouth County. My neighbor 2 doors down just got her car stolen right out of her driveway. You can watch it on her Ring camera. They just walked in up the driveway, took the car, and you talk to the local police departments, and it's infuriating because you'll put the person in jail, the next day they'll get out. And a lot of the times they're minors, right? So they're 16 years old because they'll be recruited by the local gangs. So it's a huge problem. They also talked about the pop-up parties that are happening down the Jersey Shore over the past Memorial Day weekend that have been out of control. And getting that under control too. With the local police departments. That's a really big problem. So I was glad to hear all the candidates address it, and I think they did a really good job.
And we have a couple minutes left here. David, one of the thoughts that going into this debate that we really gave a lot of thought to is making sure that this was targeted, the Democratic debate for Democratic undecided voters, the Republican for the Republican undecided voters. With the primary fast approaching, people can vote by mail now. They'll be able to do early voting very soon. How do you think this final debate, how do you hope this final debate was impacting those undecided voters?
Well, I mean, that's what it's for. So I hope it did. These aren't productions set up for the sake of doing it. It is to help voters become more informed. And I think down the road there's got to be consideration by the legislature of changing the window on debates. The statute, nothing to do with ELEC. They don't even they don't make the laws. But when when the legislature changed the window in which people voted and move it up. And now you've got vote by mail ballots going out in the third week of September, and and in the third week of April for this election, but you couldn't do debates at all until May. There's a lot of voters that are voting without an opportunity to really see anything other than paid communication. So, I hope that's what it did. And, we talk internally, and I hope I'm not giving away any state secrets here, but, when Laura, you and I and your crew and the Globe team were sort of doing our production meetings, we realized for a Democratic debate, we can't moderate it from the center, or all of the candidates are going to agree with every question. So we have to move a little bit to the left. And then 2 days later, when we're doing a Republican debate, we've got to move a little bit to the right and sort of look for differences between the candidates. Hopefully we did that. All
right, Jeanette, I give you final thoughts here. You have 15 seconds, or I'll have to bring up my moderator bell. Final thoughts on how you think this impacted voters.
I think everyone saw some differences in the voters, but specifically, Bramnick, I'll leave to the side. I think he really appealed more to an independent, moderate-leaning Republican. But I think between Spadia and Ciattarelli, you definitely saw that Spadia leaned more conservative than Ciattarelli in certain policy positions. And I think that's what the debate was for, right? To kind of stake out the differences in policies. And it was a very policy-minded debate. So I give you all and your teams a lot of credit for putting it together and being able to see those differences between the candidates. So congratulations.
Well, thank you very much. And thank you for joining us, David and Jeanette. We really appreciate your time, insight, and analysis.
Thanks for having us.
And that'll do it for today. I'm Laura Jones. Thanks so much for watching New Jersey Politics. We look forward to seeing you back here next time.